Hey, welcome to Thought Provokers. I'm Bob Nolan, your personal and passionate thought provocateur, here to provoke, but never to irritate. We've been talking a little bit about interpreting God to human beings. Sometimes one way to see the good side is to take a look at the bad side. Oh yeah, there's a bad side. It's called misinterpreting God to human beings. Now, I'm not talking about, Bible study and exegesis and looking up the Greek words and the Hebrew words and all that. I'm talking about actually personally not presenting or interpreting our Dad in heaven in a good way, in a real way, in an accurate way to other human beings. One of the things that I've been privileged to do over the last 15 years really is to go to other countries and try my best to explain God to people. I'm always at the mercy of my translator, or preferably my interpreter. Charlene, my girlfriend, and my wife, goes with me to Central America because, well, for one thing, because she's my girlfriend and my wife, but also because she is my number one interpreter. We joke with each other sometimes, and she'll say, "Well, yeah, you're up there preaching, but I'm preaching my own sermon." One funny thing we have is somebody comes up to us and announces, "Boy, that lady preaches really good. Why does that white guy keep interrupting her? Ha ha ha." Well, one thing that I can say is that I have complete trust in Charlene, because not only is she parsing my words and translating my words word for word, but she knows my heart, she knows my soul, she knows my lifestyle, she knows what I believe. So I can say what I need to say, and I can trust her to accurately not only translate my words, but represent what I say. But I've had a couple of experiences, yes I have, where because I knew a few of the Spanish words that were going on, I've had interpreters or translators that actually purposely misrepresented me. I could hear a word that I understood, heard another word, and I thought, that's not what I said, and I'd have to talk to them later and say, why did you misinterpret me? And why? Because they had an agenda. They thought that what they had to say was more important, or that they could actually reinterpret what I had to say. That is not what a speaker wants. Wow. There's been people, there's even a couple of interesting examples in the scripture where people misinterpreted God to people. Remember old Job? They say that the book of Job is the oldest book in the Bible in terms of when it was written. I don't know that for sure, but it's really, really old. Well, Job was kind of left with boils on his back, if you remember the story, a really bitter wife, and 3 really crummy friends. These friends, these so-called friends, as in with friends like these, who needs enemies, thought they had the right agenda from God to Job. They said, man, if you were right with God, none of this would be happening to you. Now, if you read through the book of Job and read the speeches of these guys, you'll find out that they actually had some pretty decent theology. But theology was not what Job needed at that time. Desperate people, broken-hearted people, are not looking for theology to shame them, to put them in their place, to explain everything they did wrong. They need encouragement from heaven. Another kind of wild example is from one of the best people in the whole Bible, Moses. 40 years living in Egypt, 40 years in the wilderness, and then another 40 years leading God's people around and around the desert, waiting to go into the promised land. Well, Moses always did have kind of an anger problem. I don't know if he ever really got over it, but his anger and irritation with the people that God wanted to help wound up provoking him to misinterpret God. Do you remember the story? They were about to go into the promised land. They were thirsty, they wanted water, they were complaining. As usual, they were kind of an irritation. So God says to Moses, what am I going to do with these people? Or actually, Moses said to God, what am I going to do with these people? God says, I'll tell you what, they need some water. You see that rock over there? Go talk to the rock. The water will come out, they'll have their water, and then we'll take care of business. Well, Moses wasn't completely happy with God's plan. So he takes his big, remember that big stick, that big rod he had? He walks over to the people, and instead of just doing what God told him to do, he says, "So, you want water? I'll get some water for you." He takes his rod, and he whacks that thing. Whacks the rock. The water comes out, and everybody's thirst is quenched. Sometimes, just because good results happen doesn't mean we've interpreted God correctly, because the next thing you know, God is looking at Moses and saying, "Come here." Misinterpreting God. Now, calm down, everybody. I'm just trying to explain this thing. God says to Moses, "I told you to speak to the rock, but you whacked it. You got mad at the people. You didn't," as the old King James says, "you didn't sanctify me." That is, you didn't set me apart from yourself, Moses. It's one thing for you to be angry. It's another thing for you to make the people think that I'm angry. Moses, you were angry. I wasn't. Moses misinterpreted God. Wow. Even Jesus' disciples fell into the trap. Somebody be preaching this way or trying to cast out a demon that way, and they'd say stuff like, "Hey, Jesus, you want us to go down and call fire out of heaven to consume these people?" Jesus says, "It doesn't matter. Leave them alone." It's really easy to misinterpret God. All we have to do is have our own agenda. Oh, you can be sincere. You can be passionate. You can even have correct theology. But sometimes sincerity, passion, and correct theology doesn't get the job done. Knowing the heart of our dad gets the job done for interpreting God correctly. I have been guilty of this so many times in my life. I started preaching over 40 years ago. I had kind of a sincere mentality, a passionate mentality. I always read the Bible, studied theology, but I didn't have the gift developed in me of what we call empathy. Putting myself in the shoes of the people to whom I was speaking. I think it's easy for me to look back now, I don't know, maybe you too, and realize that my sincerity, my passion, even my correct theology was not necessarily the elixir God had to encourage people. And as sincere as I was, I could say things to people that would leave them more discouraged than encouraged. When you're interpreting God, you're making a sound from heaven. When you're interpreting anyone, you want to know what's their heart, what's their culture, what's their motivation. If you're going to truly represent, if I am going to truly represent someone for whom I am speaking, I need to know not only the meanings of their literal words, but the heart of what they want to get across. Even people that maybe need some correction don't need to hear words like Moses' words, or the words of Job's so-called friends, or the words of the disciples. They didn't just need words, they needed a heart. They needed to really interpret God, or really interpret whoever sent them. I've seen people called Jezebels, I've seen them called troublemakers, I've seen them called apostates and heretics and all kinds of things, not because they were bad, not because they were those things, but because maybe they weren't expressing the agenda of the religious person that wanted to correct them. Theology is about God. But theology doesn't necessarily, even good theology, and I love good theology. I love good speeches. I love good Bible study. I love good politics, good philosophy. But if I can't put myself in the shoes of those to whom I'm speaking, I may be misinterpreting the one that sent me to speak. Sometimes I've observed modern Christianity, churchianity, make a package out of God than a person of God, and He is a person. I want to help people know what God sounds like, know what He looks like, and know His manner of speaking. Isn't that what interpreting God is all about? You take care.